And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile and completely unobservant forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. My friends, the politics in Wyoming is, well, I mean, I don't even want to say that it's heating up. I mean, it kind of is. It's more like a slow boil. A little bit more than a simmer, but not exactly furiously boiling. There's a lot of forums and so-called debates going on. And there was one that happened yesterday that you should be particularly interested in, mainly because most of the participants refused to show up. Yeah, I know. You know, you're running as a Republican, and there's a Republican debate, and you choose not to show up. Only after you had accepted the invitation, and then you decided to decline it. Why, my friends? Because many of the people that are running in the Republican primary aren't Republicans at all, which raises a number of questions. How do you, as a voter, tell the difference between a triple CR, that is a Campbell County counterfeit Republican, and an actual Republican? I don't know, we use a number of different devices. One of those is a voting record, and the other is simply a platform pledge. And you know, with new candidates, it's really hard to say how they're going to vote. Because they haven't voted yet, and so the only thing that you can do is go on what they tell you. And in Wyoming, most of what you hear at the doorstep is, you know, I love my guns. Taxes are too high. We probably shouldn't kill little babies. I'm a conservative, and you should vote for me. That's pretty much the long and the short of what we hear from all of these people at our doorstep. And so how are we to tell the difference? Well, one of those is pretty obvious, right? If they don't show up to a Republican event, or they've never showed up to a Republican event, well, then that's a pretty good indication that they're not who they say they are, and you shouldn't vote for them. But there are a number of these redcoats throughout the state that are claiming that there's purity tests. Oh, you know, this Republican platform, even though it's been in the same since probably 2018. Yeah, well, that's just a purity test. That doesn't really mean anything. We shouldn't pay any attention to that whatsoever. Well, that's a load of garbage. The Republican Party has had a platform since, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln. And so to suggest that a platform is somehow a purity test, or that asking a Republican candidate, or excuse me, I've got the phraseology all wrong, running as a Republican is somehow a purity test. Well, it's not, never was, never has been. And so one of the guys that has been involved in the Republican Party since, I've been around, is Vince Vanata. Vinny, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. You got your camera on, or are we just doing the whole audio thing today?
No, that's the wrong camera. No, we're gonna do both. Give me a second.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
there you are.
Yeah, I got two cameras here, so I apologize.
Excellent. Well, how you doing this morning? First,
I'm doing well. Gosh, you got me up early today, man. It's
hey, I mean, if you want to beat the cow pie, I mean, sacrifices must be made, Vinny.
yes, they may. That's why I'm here today. Certainly appreciate you having me on here today.
Of course. Well, it has been a really long time. Have you ever been on my program before?
Never.
Okay. Well, first time. So why don't you just take a minute or two and tell my audience about yourself?
Well, I live in Cody, Wyoming. I am a transplant here. My family and we purchased our home here in 2002 while I was still in the Marine Corps, and moved my family here. And then I retired from the Marines in end of August 2003. And, we did it with the intent of we wanted a place to raise our family. We had young kids at the time. And I certainly had no desire to go back where I was from. And my wife had no desire to go where she was from. And so we'd been to Cody a couple of times to visit some friends here and felt it was a great place to retire. And so we are here. I spent 20 years in the 22 years in the Marine Corps and 8 years in law enforcement. And then I was blessed with being able to retire at 48 and a half.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I consume a lot of my time with the Republican Party. And, and as you brought up this issue with this purity test, it has been the one for this year. Every election, it seems to be something new that people are opposed to saying that they are a part of or that they want to have to identify with. And, and it's interesting, the people that we deal with. But, for myself, I raised my hand, and one day I actually tried to figure it out how many times I actually rose my hand and took an oath. And this is interesting too, because I find people who are opposed to this platform, this questionnaire, are some people who have been in the military or some people who have been in law enforcement, and they just say, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm opposed to this, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm actually looking for the one guy who just kind of shocked me because he was also in the military. He was in the Marines like myself, and he was in law enforcement like myself, and is opposed to this whole thing. And, and as you briefly hit on the issue about the platform, I talked with Brian Miller, the state chairman, about this, and I said, I'm going on the radio, and this was a couple of weeks ago, going on the radio here locally. Help me out with this platform to understand it a little bit better. And he said, and the 80% mark. Why 80%? And he brought up about 8 years ago, there was a big fray in the Republican Party about
huge.
Yeah. Should it be 100%? Should it be 50%? Should it not be any percent? What should it be? And this argument at this meeting, I guess, went all morning long. And then at lunchtime, some people were talking, and then somebody brought up the issue of Ronald Reagan. And, and Ronald Reagan's statement about the 80% thing and how it came about, and I had to look it up. A person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. So they came up with 80%. And I believe he told me 73 out of 74 people were in favor of that 80% threshold. So I don't get where the objection is. These people want to put a brand after their name. They want to say they're a Republican. And fine, they want to be a Republican. They want to run in the Republican race. That certainly is their right. But I believe the voters have a right to know where these people stand when they put this brand after their name.
Well, I think that's the biggest part of it, isn't it, Vinny? That we have all these people that say, I'm running, and I love this phrase, I'm running as a Republican. They never say I'm a Republican. It's, I'm identifying, or whatever the term they use these days is. But if somebody doesn't have a voting record, how are you to determine, which candidate is, more in line with your values? I mean, it's pretty hard if you don't have, I don't know, some sort of measure. And, and the Republican Party isn't the only group that has a platform pledge. I mean, the Club for Growth, they have a survey. Gun Owners of America has a survey. The NRA has a survey, like all these groups do. Why is it just in your mind? And you've been around like redcoats for quite a while. So what do you think it is that makes the Republican Party platform pledge? And if you could kind of explain for us what that is, but what is it that makes that different from all of these other surveys?
Well, I think what makes it different now is that you've got people involved in the Republican Party who years ago would not have been involved in the Republican Party. Because for the most part, the Republican Party, and I'm talking 8, 9, 10 years ago, especially in this county, was a social club. It was not people who cared about their country, cared about the state, cared about the county, cared about local things. It was a social club. People would get together, socialize, do the business they had to do at the meeting, and then laugh and joke and just do whatever they want to do.
Hit the bar, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, and that was it. So, flash forward into the 21st century, we now have people who are actually engaged in what's going on. And one of the things I like to point to, the reason for this change is the internet. You have people now who are no longer relegated to local news, which might, or more often not, cover those things on a state level, on a national level. It's all feel-good stuff in the local news. And then, here in this part of the state, a lot of people used to read the Billings Gazette and, the Casper Red Star Tribune. And that's where they would depend upon their news from. And so they had no idea. Well, fast forward, we now have this thing called the internet. And people have the ability to find information on the internet and to verify it and vet it. And so that's what we as a Republican Party are doing now, is we are providing information and resources to the voters. Rush Limbaugh used to use the phrase, the low information voter. We don't want voters to be low information voters. We don't want them to get into the ballot box and say, shoot, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. I'm just going to vote for everybody Republican. And that's nonsensical to just do that. I would respect somebody if they left it blank instead of just writing some, or filling in a blank because the person was a Republican without knowing who they are. So we've seen this change of going from a social club to people who are involved. And these people who were part of the social club would look at these individuals and say I wrote some of these things down, that they are right-wing radicals, that they are MAGA extremists, fascists. Yeah. I even got called a Christian nationalist one day.
Really?
I didn't know to be.
Did you get a definition to go along with that?
Well, the guy that told me about this, I said, can we break that down? Yes, I'm a Christian. Okay. Yeah, no problems there. A nationalist. Do I believe in my country? Yeah. I served in the Marines for 22 years, rose my hand, uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help me God. So I guess I'm a nationalist. Can we put the two of them together and make it sound good? And he's like, no, that's not the context that they put it in.
Oh.
Yeah, Christian nationalist is a bad thing. So I said, well, I guess I'm guilty as charged. So that's something I could, I guess, say is a good thing. I am a Christian and I am a nationalist. I love my faith, and I love my country.
Vinny, I'm not surprised that there's this outrage from, and it always comes from one particular sector of the electorate, and it's always people who are they're the folks that just realize it's hard to get elected as Democrats. Let's just be honest about it. But these platform pledges, and to describe for my audience what I'm talking about, is essentially it's a survey. And so we send it out to candidates and say, here are the 23 planks of the platform. Do you, like the one in Sheridan, it has a couple check marks, yes, no, undecided. And then there's a couple of lines where you could, write your thoughts or whatever.
Elaborate on it, yeah.
Yeah, and so we send those out to candidates, and we've been doing that for, ever since I've been involved in politics. I remember I've got a file of some more incriminating ones from people who claimed to be Republican and then turned out not to be, but from years ago. So this is nothing new. What I think is new is the Republican Party has decided that they're going to, endorse candidates and financially support them. So I think that's really the part that some of these redcoats are objecting to. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, exactly. And what they're doing is, and because I'm going to pull up the statute here, I've got this on my phone and I keep it handy because this comes up quite frequently. There's a Wyoming statute, 22-25-104. And it states, and very simply, no political party funds shall be expended directly or indirectly in the aid of the nomination of any one person against another person of the same political party running in the primary election. Money. Can't spend money directly or indirectly. And so and I had a discussion with a former legislator the other night about this matter. And she told me, she said, you have to look at the legislative intent behind this.
I can tell you what that is.
I said, well, I would believe that the legislative intent was to suppress the voice of the members of the Republican Party that were supposed to just lockstep along with the certain people in our state, what they say and what they don't say we should do. And we just must agree with them, and we shall remain quiet until after the primary. And let's face it, once we get out of the primary, we're stuck with whoever won the primary. Like if we go back to Mark Gordon when he ran his first race for governor,
or Matt Mead.
Yeah, we had to support the guy with 32% of the vote. That was just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous that he won the primary with 32% of the vote. And all that happened during that first race was they saturated the field with people. And the guy with name recognition came out on top. And that's how he got in there and then was able to stay in there. So through name recognition, not through job performance. And it's a lot because people don't have the resources and information to find out what's going on. And so that's as a Republican Party at the state level, the county levels, that's what we're trying to do now is provide a resource for the voter to go ahead and use to make a decision on who to vote. And this vetting process is we're essentially doing the work for the voter. It's very, very transparent. And like I've tried to explain to people ad nauseum, is that this is not a win or lose when it comes to the vetting process and the endorsement process. In Park County, we've got, I believe it's 10 people running for county commissioner for 3 seats.
Wow.
Talk about diluting the field. And the one who was the loudest about this is an incumbent, former sheriff here in Park County. His whole mindset is now he's talking about why he won't do this. He says, your group's choice for endorsement has already been made, and I will not be involved in debate. Lastly, I refuse to be involved in a group that publicly states they will ignore election law. Respectfully, Scott A. Stewart. And he's and I'm not dropping names on him. He sent it to me in an email, so it's not a secret. So he sent this out accusing us of having a corrupt system. And we're going to prove him wrong because this process is going to be very transparent, very open. And, the thing he doesn't realize is it's not the executive committee choosing or endorsing these people. It's the central committee. We're providing the information to the people in the Park County Republican Party, the central committee, to vote on people to endorse or not to endorse.
So in Sheridan, we decided. Ooh, somebody's blowing up your phone.
It's time for the dogs to go to the groomer.
Oh, all right. Do we need to cut this short?
No, the wife's got
Okay.
that taken care of.
All right. So in Sheridan, we decided to do something a little bit different. I mean, I guess it's along the same lines, but what we're going to do is send out, our platform surveys, and let's be honest, like the Republican Party platform has been around unchanged, pretty much since like I don't know, 2016, 2018, somewhere around there, where we whittled it down to 23 planks. So it's the same stuff. But what we're going to do is send out the surveys. I think they're going out either today or tomorrow. And then whomever responds, we're going to publish those surveys on our website. Hey, these are the people that responded. Go check them out. And then the people who choose not to respond, well, we're going to publish those names too. And like you say, all of it is just information for the voter. And I don't understand how in this state somehow we think that a political party cannot be active in an election. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre to me. I mean, I understand the motivation behind it. It's redcoat incumbents got this law into statute so that they could, it's easier for them to not really have any opposition during the primary. I mean, that's why. But really, I mean, the whole point in doing this is to tell voters, hey, these are the people that filled out our survey. These are the folks that didn't. Make your own decision.
Exactly, and it's not really a hard thing. I mean, we're asking for the platform. We're asking questions. For the incumbents, they have a voting record, and here in this county, we did a debate. We did a legislative debate, and we did a commissioner's debate. And so we're going to use that information as a tool to put forward a recommendation on this is who the vetting committee recommends, and this is why, and this is who we don't recommend, and this is why. Ultimately, people are going to make a decision. And a question that I received from this one former legislator here is this going to be a roll call vote when we do this vetting? And I said no. This is one of the tools that the establishment uses to put pressure on people to not vote a certain way or to vote a certain way by having people get out there in front and say, well, yeah, I support this person, this person, this person. And then if they don't support someone else, then all of a sudden they might lose their job. Gosh, that never happens here. Their kids may not get on the starting team, a football team or a basketball team or something along those lines. So my response to that was no, it's going to be a secret ballot. And this person tried to say, well, I, as a constituent, I deserve to know. And that's the thing I had to educate her on, is that precinct committee members are not elected officials. And this has been a misnomer that's gone on for years. They're chosen in the primary. Elected officials are chosen in the general. And elected officials take an oath. Elected officials have to post a bond. Elected officials have to file a campaign finance report. Elected officials are chosen by the population as a whole, not in the primary by a political party. So this idea that the people within a precinct are constituents, no, that's a casual phrase. I think it's a misinterpretation.
And they should be constituents.
But they're fellow Republicans. And, and the Republican Party is going down the road now of that we are a private organization and we're not a governmental entity. Certainly, we're not a political subdivision of the state of Wyoming. We get no money from the state on a yearly basis. We can't establish rules with the force of law. So we are essentially a private entity, and because we're a private entity, we have First Amendment rights, and we have 14th Amendment rights. Those are two things that have been suppressed for years within this state by telling those people in the Republican Party, you shall be quiet before the primary. You shall not support candidates before the primary. And if you do, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
This year,
now
it's going to be different.
Now, Vinny, I've actually got a soundbite from a Republican women debate in Gillette last night. and it's one of my favorite targets, Ogden Driscoll. But I want to play it for you and get your reaction to what he says, because he's complaining about these so-called purity tests. Here, give it a listen.
There's some other things you can probably work on, but there are some things on that platform that I think definitely have to. If you're going to call yourself a Republican,
That's Chip right there, but Augie will be here in a minute.
Thank you. I am a lifelong Republican from conception. I will tell you that. I will not sign your platform. Will not. And here's why. I've been down this road with this end of the deal with the party. It's really interesting. These are purity tests, and they pick and choose bills that fall within pieces of platforms to do it. It's the exact same thing as the ranking websites that are out there. And you vote on one amendment that failed or something that happened, and they turn it and they change it. And I will tell you right now, I went through your list. I'm probably at 96% in my mind in the way I do it. But I can tell you this, and I've been treated this way, it won't come out that way when you run all your votes through. The way you tell a Republican is take a look at his record, take a look at his voting and what he's done. You can figure it out, vote him in or vote him out, but don't try to force him in a mold somewhere. And that's really what you're doing. You're trying to force him into a specific line of thinking. And your policies that are there do not mention specific bills.
Shut up, Augie. So what do you think, Benny?
Well, I think Ogden Driscoll, number one, is nervous that he's not going to get reelected this year. And there's a very, very good chance that he's not going to get reelected. Thank goodness for the state of Wyoming.
No kidding.
And I'm sorry, he's nonsensical. When he says that he scores 96% on that, but he doesn't want to put it out there, why wouldn't he want the voters to know that he aligns with the platform 96%? That more than meets the criteria that the Republican Party says. I mean, if he were smart about this, he would say, hey, I'm at 96%. Here's my platform. Thank you very much. And then the party endorses him because he says he's in alignment at least 80%. Put the party in a hard position and say, hey, I agree, 96%. And put the party in the position where, wow, we got to endorse him. This guy says he supports it. And that's what we've asked, and that's what he's provided for us. And then that resource is passed on to the voters who ultimately make the decision on who to vote for or who not to vote for. I mean, we're not putting poll watchers or election judges at the polling places and say, hey, vote this way. We don't operate that way. We don't. We just provide the information, and then you get out there and vote. But I don't get Ogden Driscoll's mindset that this is where he sits, and but he's not going to do it. And if he's going to be principled like that, then he's got to live with that consequence.
But don't you think, Vinny, that really their problem is the argument they have is all about accountability? That they know that when, if they make it to Cheyenne, that they're not going to be voting in line with the Republican Party platform. And the reason they won't sign the pledge is then they can be held accountable to it. Augie, his voting record is not good. It's abysmal, right? And so I think the problem his real argument is that he doesn't want anything out there that he can be held accountable to. And that's the biggest problem right there, I think, in my opinion.
And I would agree with that. But you have people out there who have that R after their name, and they've been in there for long periods of time. For instance, Cale Case out of Fremont County.
Another good one.
Yeah, he just continually votes along the Democratic Party lines, but has R after his name and unabashedly tells people to change political parties to have an impact in the Republican Party's primary. That happened in Park County here, where we had a person running for state senator this year, put it on. We caught it early, thank goodness, but he was encouraging people to change political parties. why would you do that as a Republican if you weren't trying to garner votes from Democrats, unaffiliated, constitutionalists, libertarians, everyone else, trying to scrounge up every vote that you possibly can? And we saw this with Liz Cheney a couple of years ago when Harriet Hagman ran against her. She was out there trying to get people to change their political party affiliation because they realized that it's an untapped resource where they can put some numbers into their camp. And they make the person who aligns with the Republican Party as the bad guy. So it's just this game that goes on every 2 years is just pathetic. Just pathetic what happens.
Well, that particular former state senator that you're referring to, I wouldn't want to drop any names, but his name is R.J. Cost. I happen to have a video of him in talking with in the video. He's talking to Nate Martin, who is Carly Provenza's husband. And the topic of conversation is, how do we get more Democrats elected? And at the time that video was made, he was a sitting Republican state senator. And so, one of the reasons why they do this, again, is to, dilute the conservative vote and, get as many redcoats in office as they can.
Hey, real quick, if we could hit on something on that word, that nasty more than 4-letter word, conservative.
Yeah.
I heard a new one this past weekend. So we've got a guy running for House District 50 here. And during our legislative debate, he said that he was not running as a Republican this primary period. That he's running as a conservative.
Okay.
Now, I think you and I both know there's no conservative party in this state.
No.
The two major parties, Republican, Democrat, then we have unaffiliated, and then a few other minor parties. But yeah, he says he's running as a conservative. And so he's been on social media this week trying to explain his comment. And of course, he's got to say, kind of like what Ogden Driscoll just says, I've been a Republican my whole life. And I, identify with the Republican platform, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is that it appears these people are trying to distance themselves with being a Republican by saying they are a conservative. And then those people who are the real conservatives, here's another 4-letter word for you, those associated with the Freedom Caucus.
Oh, yeah.
They are bad. They are bad. And,
evil
yes.
even.
And so they're putting them on the far right, extremists, MAGA, fascists, whatever the case might be. And they have redefined what a conservative is to suit their agenda. And so that seems to be the narrative and the direction that they're moving this primary season. And I got to tell you, they're out there, they're making a lot of noise. But what's interesting is they're getting to the point here where they've shot their load, their final protective fire is gone. And now they are at the point where they're just repeating themselves over and over and over. And it's the same thing over and over and over. One of the organizations I see out there leading the charge statewide is right there in Sheridan. You got, I might get this backwards, 307 Civics or Civics.
Yeah.
307.
Gail Simmons.
Yes, Simmons. It's kind of like with Clark Stith.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is, that organization is engaged around the state. She even came here and spoke in Park County to the Chamber of Commerce. And it was fascinating that our political party here in Park County, actually, we signed up to be members of the Chamber of Commerce this past January, just to be involved. And at one of the meetings, one of their government, they call it their Government Affairs Committee, one of their members blurted out, hey, we're coming up on the deadline here for the change in political affiliation. If you want to run for office or you want to vote in the Republican primary, you got to change your political affiliation. I mean, this came from the chamber.
Yeah.
And then they had Civics 307 or 307 Civics, whatever it is, come here to talk to people in the community. And they've got a pack here now. And they say, well, the PAC is for the lodging tax, but they're not doing away with the PAC because the lodging tax was 2 years ago. So
Right.
they're keeping it. So they're being quiet about it. And we've seen we've seen chambers of commerce around the state act nefariously and do things. And even on the national level, the Chamber of Commerce is, a bad organization.
Yeah, they're a bunch of communists for sure.
So it's, they're pulling out all the stops on this here. And the irony of it is our own governor is right here, is the head of the snake. We saw when the legislature met this last period that when the legislature went into session, he got on his airplane and went around the state engaging with people in the community, telling them to contact their legislators to pass his budget.
Yeah.
You got to pass my budget. You got to pass my budget. And unbeknownst to most people, he had already written a check for $150,000 to his Prosperity and Commerce PAC. And if we look at the funding, if we look at the funding from the last election cycle, he essentially funded every, I'm not going to call them liberal, non-conservative candidate running. Anyone running against an incumbent who was conservative in nature or anybody who was a member of the Freedom PAC became a target. And they dumped some serious cash into running again, or funding those people running against the conservatives for him. And essentially what we saw is the governor trying to buy the legislature.
Right.
And, the governor already owns the judiciary. He appoints every judge. He appoints everybody on the judiciary committee. There's some automatics from the Wyoming Bar Association, but he appoints everyone else. And then he makes a decision on who's going to become a judge. So he owns the judicial. And here he is trying to buy the legislature. And the funny thing is the whole Checkgate thing where he made a big deal about that, about, donations being passed out on the floor. I would love to know where he wrote that check for his PAC. Did he write that in his office in the Capitol? Or did he write that check in his residence in the gubernatorial mansion?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Or did he write it in the back seat of, the SUV with the S1 license plate? Or did he write it, while he was on his airplane?
I think he probably got in his old ranch pickup and drove somewhere around Cheyenne, wrote the check, and then went back to the governor's mansion. I'm sure that that's what happened.
I bet you we could find GPS information to prove that because, he would never do anything unethical.
No, never.
So I think he definitely would do that. And he probably drove out to the eastern part of Cheyenne where they're going to be building all those data centers. Let me sit here and write this check for the PAC back.
Yeah, why not? Well, Vinny, I got to run, my friend. But if my viewers want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Okay, two ways. I do have an email address. You can get me at VE Vanata, that's Victor Echo Vanata, V as in Victor, ANATA @gmail.com. Or if you'd like to talk, you can reach me at 307-250-5639. Just keep in mind, if it's before 8 a.m., my phone is muted. I'm sorry, I won't hear you, but I am up late at night also. So I'm always willing to have a chat. And David, I really appreciate you having me on there and for this opportunity to clear things up and just to help people understand. This is just a resource to help people to be able to go into the ballot box and make an educated decision in who to vote for.
Yep. Well, I appreciate it, Vinny. Thanks for getting up early, my friend. And I'm sure we'll have you on, later, a few weeks or so as the election gets on. But have a good one. Let me know if you hear anything, my friend.
Will do. You take care. Have a good day.
All right, bye. All right, so that was Vince Vanata, the chairman of the Park County Republican Party. Fascinating guy. Always have a good conversation with him. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the debates that almost happened in Gillette yesterday. Back in a minute.
watching what's happening in our country and asking, what can I do? Join the John Birch Society in Salt Lake City, June 6th, for a powerful one-day conference. The day includes a host of respected speakers, 2 meals, and meaningful connections. You'll gain clarity on the issues and walk away with practical steps you can take to your community. Reserve your seat today at jbs.org/SLC26. That's jbs.org/SLC26.
One of those speakers at the Salt Lake City event will be yours truly. That's right, my friends. I'm one of the keynote speakers at the JBS 2026 conference. So join me in Salt Lake City if you want to see me. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
You won't find him leading a horse out of a barn or leaning against a corral with the sun setting behind him, because Wyomingites don't need a candidate who creates a good photo op. What you will find is a hard-working, experienced leader who believes Wyoming should always come first. A conservative grounded in strong values and steady principles. Ready to lead Wyoming the right way. Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The 2 guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, your illustrious host, doing what I was born to do, with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. It's Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday. Thank you for joining me. If you're just now joining us, I just finished talking to Vince Vanata. Vinny is the chairman of the Park County Republican Party. And make sure, if you missed that interview, go back and listen to it. We were talking about the so-called purity tests. Yes, these evil little things that tell voters whether or not you're actually a Republican. And that ends up being the big question. Here in Sheridan, there are a number of people. I think that just about every legislative race is being challenged. But if you don't have a platform pledge or something that says, yeah, I believe in these things, then one, we don't have anything to hold you accountable to when you get to Cheyenne. And that, I think, right there is the biggest part of it. But barring that, how are voters to determine whether or not you're a Republican, or how Republican you are, or if you're pro-business, or you're anti-business, or if you want to kill babies, or how are we to determine that? You certainly can't look at anybody's signs. Here in Sheridan, a lot of the redcoats have green signs. Now, I've never met a Republican that paints their campaign signs green. It smacks too much of Colorado, which might be, that might be what they're after. I don't know. But if you're the, low information voter and you see these signs and they're all green, why would you assume that that's a Republican? Most Republicans I've seen have red, white, and blue signs. Or in some cases, just red and white. Red, Republican. I know. It makes perfect sense. But I guess if you are, if you're not necessarily, aligned with the Republican Party, then maybe you want your signs to be green, which I assume should be the case with a lot of Campbell County redcoats. Now, there was supposed to be a lot of debates that happened in Campbell County yesterday, and to be fair, there was a couple of them. A couple of candidates did show up, but the ones that are more interesting are a few three of them actually, and one of which agreed to show up to the debate and then later rescinded their acceptance. I don't know how you put that, but they didn't even show up. Now, how could you be a Republican and not show up to a Republican debate? Well, those three candidates were, let me see here, Dwayne Dillinger, who is running against Abby Angelos for Senate District 23, Douglas Moore, who thinks he's running against Representative John Baer in House District 31, and Ann Ziegenhorn, who is running against Earl Collier in House District 3. So those three people just didn't even show up at the debate. But one of them did send their campaign manager, who happens to be Tyler Lindholm's sister. So you can send your campaign manager, but you can't bother on a Monday evening to show up and debate. That speaks volumes about who you are. Now, whether you're a Democrat, let's just take one of the Democrats, Mike Yen. Now, Mike is as Democrat as you can get, but one thing that is different between him and these three redcoats in Gillette is Mike will show up. Mike has no problem defending his beliefs. He has what I would say the courage of his convictions, however misguided they might be. But these three people in Gillette, they just didn't even show up. My friends, leadership means showing up, even when you don't want to. Now, if they're not even going to show up for a debate, and by the way, I listened to most of it. The questions were not hard. None of them were out of left field. If you're a Republican at all, you should have been able to answer them. But these three people decided because they didn't like the venue, the Republican Party, and they were just afraid to defend their beliefs in public, they didn't show up. So riddle me this, riddle me that, Batman. If they're not even going to show up to a Republican debate, what makes you think they're going to show up for you any other time? I mean, it's largely a pretty friendly audience, right? If you're at a Republican at all, it shouldn't be that hard. Now, the debates that we're going to run here in Sheridan, I mean, I think the invitation letter is going to go out today or the next day. But in the letter, it says, hey, we're not going to release the topics ahead of time. However, all of them will in some way, relate to the Republican Party platform. I mean, after all, it's a Republican debate. These things are not complicated. But here's another interesting piece from County 17 News this morning. Here's the headline. Republican candidates for House and Senate seats outline priorities during debate in Gillette. Now, to his credit, old Ogden Driscoll, did show up. Chris Knapp's opponent also showed up. And Rhonda Bowler and, Bill Fortner showed up also. So, to their credit, they were on the stage and they argued their points. However, what the County 17 News piece does not point out at all is those three not showing up. And so it leads you to believe that just whomever just showed up, just a candidate, and that was it, that it really wasn't a debate. And it makes no mention whatsoever that those three people, at least one of whom originally said that they would be at the debate and then decided that they weren't going to be. But the piece doesn't mention those candidates that didn't show up at the debate. And this is what the media does. I mean, they give cover fire to these redcoats so that, there's no evidence that they were, derelict in their candidate duties. But here's what the opening piece says, or the opening of it. Quote, candidates for several Wyoming legislative seats discussed issues ranging from judicial reform and energy policy to abortion and property taxes during a debate hosted by the Campbell County Republican Women and the Campbell County Republican Party. Moderators were Laura Cox, George Dunlap, and Janet Mader as timekeeper. Candidates were given 2 minutes to give an introduction, after which moderators would ask questions, which had another 2-minute time limit for answering. And so Abby Angelos, John Baer, and Earl Collier, they just stood up there by themselves and answered questions. Now, here's the other thing that just blows my mind. And I'm kind of bouncing around here, but little frustrated after I watched those so-called debates last night. But anyway, if you don't show up, there's nobody that's going to argue with your opponent for you. And so, here in Sheridan, one of the things we're going to do, it says right in the letter, if you don't show up, half of the time allotted for that segment is going to be given to your opponent, and they can do whatever they want with it. If they want to hold their own town hall and ask questions, good. If they want to stand up there and talk for 15 minutes, good, or 20 or whatever the time ends up being. But if you're not even going to show up and defend your position, then you shouldn't expect that anybody else is going to carry the water for you. Now, as it relates to that soundbite I played during the Vince Vanata interview, the truth is that while Augie, and let me just play it one more time for you, just so we're clear and so we're not saying, hey, remember when, but here it is again. Listen to this.
There's some other things you can probably work on, but there are some things
That's
on
Chip
that
Nyman
platform
right there.
that I think definitely have to. If you're going to call yourself a Republican, you better be helping and working with your opposition support.
Thank you. I am a lifelong Republican from conception. I will tell you that. I will not sign your platform. Will not. And here's why. I've been down this road with this end of the deal with the party. It's really interesting. These are purity tests, and they pick and choose bills that fall within pieces of the platforms to do it. It's the exact same thing as the ranking websites that are out there. And you vote on one amendment that failed or something that happened, and they turn it and they change it. And I will tell you right now, I went through your list. I'm probably at 96% in my mind, in the way I do it. But I can tell you this, and I've been treated this way, it won't come out that way when you run all your votes through. The way you tell a Republican is take a look at his record, and take a look at his voting and what he's done. You can figure it out, vote him in or vote him out, but don't try to force him in a mold somewhere.
All right, whatever. Stop. So Augie says, I'm at 96, 97% in my mind. I'm not going to sign your platform. Okay, so first, he has no idea what he's talking about because the platform itself is the 23 planks of the Republican Party platform. Here's one of them right here. Yeah, I know it says 2024 on it, but it hasn't changed. It's the same thing. So he's saying he's not going to sign it, that he agrees with it. Why, as Vinny said in the interview, why wouldn't he? If he says it's at 96%, why not? Why not tell all your voters, hey, I agree with this thing 96% of the time? Well, let me show you why Augie will not sign the platform pledge, because his voting record doesn't come anywhere close to aligning with that. Let's see here. Where is it? All right, so let's just do this. We're going to get the whole weird thing on the screen, but just check it out for just a second. Okay, there we go. So right here, it says Ogden Driscoll. Let me just highlight this for you. The reason why Ogden Driscoll won't sign the platform pledge or the platform, or why he refuses to do anything along it, is because he ranks 26th out of 31 senators as to how conservative they are. He only votes with the Republican majority 47.4% of the time. And so during the debate, there it is, right there, 47.4% of the time. The reason why he won't sign the platform pledge is because he knows that he doesn't vote that way. And if he signs it, he can be held accountable to it. I mean, that's all that it is, my friends. And I mean, Augie's the guy that he will stand up there and swear up and down that he's a Republican. And then he'll vote against things like allowing you to have ivermectin during COVID. Yeah. And here's absolutely the truth. No matter what Ogden Driscoll says, members of his family got really, really sick, and he was able to get ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine during COVID. But when we had the special session, he voted against you having it. So, he does things like that all of the time. He claims to be a Republican when he's really not. And so, at least he showed up to the debate. I mean, Augie is, I've never known Ogden Driscoll not to show up, even when, there was years ago, there was a debate in Hewlett, I think, that I was invited to. And Augie was not the popular candidate in the room, and he still got up. Now, he was sweating bullets, I'll tell you that. But at least he got up, at least he showed up and talked to constituents, okay? That's a lot better than these three nincompoops in Campbell County who, by the way, if I were if I were Abby Angelos, Earl Collier, and John Baer, I would get together and run a giant ad countywide that's just big words that says leadership means showing up. That's what I'd run that thing all over Campbell County. But I mean, and again, you shouldn't vote if these people aren't going to show up to even defend their beliefs. Well, then, I mean, they should just resign right now and vote for the others. All right, so we're going to take another break, and when we come back, I'm going to play for you an interview I did on Friday with Carlin Jones. Carlin is running for the House of Representatives in House District 28. And so when we come back, I'll play that interview for you. He's a young guy, rancher family from one of the smallest towns in Wyoming, Otto. Did you even know that there was a town called Otto? Well, he's the man from Otto, and we'll do it next. Back in a minute. I know that you think it's spring and that the weather is just going to continue to warm up and you don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland. France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only getting stronger. This program is expanding faster than anybody expected, especially the Redcoats. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday. Me and the studio dogs moving right along through the program. Last Friday, I had a chance to visit with a young guy named Carlin Jones. He's running for House District 28 in Hot Springs County. Oh, studio dog got a hold of my earphone cord. Anyway, great guy. I really enjoyed talking with him. That seat was held by John Winters. John Winters decided to retire and not run again, and so it's an open seat. And right now there are 4 people running for it. And you could probably do the math on this yourself. Only one of which is conservative. And so here is the interview with Carlin Jones. And let me just get it queued up here. Here we go. It runs a little bit more than 20 minutes, but here you go. This is Carlin Jones, House District 28. Joining me on the program is Carlin Jones. Carlin is running for the seat currently held by Representative John Winters. Carlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, David.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself to my audience?
Okay, well, my name's Carlin Jones. I'm running for House District 28. I'm a farmer and rancher out here in Otto, Wyoming. The reason I'm running is I've had state agencies step into our ranch and decide that they're going to encroach upon my statutory protections and my constitutional rights. And that's something that I'm seeing it happen from the state government all the way down through the local governments. People encroaching on people's private property rights in order to enforce some top-down agenda or whatever their goal is of the day. And that's what woke me up to realize I had to stand up and fight for my children's rights and their future. Because before I was not really participating. It pains me to say that, but I've realized that my children deserve someone who's willing to fight for them. So that's why I'm here today.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I say a lot of time on my program that, if you're having trouble finding a candidate, maybe that candidate is you. A lot of us do a lot of complaining, but unless you're willing to stand up and do something about it, maybe we all ought to complain a little bit less. So I appreciate you, stepping up to the plate. So what things, I assume that you've been going door to door in your district and, talking to your constituents. What are the big things that you're focusing on? Should you be successful in your run for the House?
Well, I'm going to be focusing on reducing spending. I hear a lot of people saying that we have a revenue problem here in the state of Wyoming, and the reality is we don't. What we have is a spending problem. So that's one focus that has to be really targeted and gone after. Another focus I have is the bureaucratic overreach. The offices and agencies and the people sitting on the boards that, like I said, have decided that they're the authority. Their job is to say, you will submit to our authority, instead of say, how do I serve you? What can I do for you? And that's the role of government. The role of government is there to represent and protect the people's rights and freedoms. The moment that they start imposing their will on others in disregard of statute and in disregard of constitutional protections, that's a violation that I can't stand for. Another one that I've heard from a lot of constituents is healthcare costs, especially among the senior citizens. They're saying that it's that they're having to pay a lot more for insurance and other things. And some people, I had a guy today actually tell me that he filled a form out and what was the word he used? He said that he didn't sign up for a certain type of Medicare. And when he did that, it made him ineligible to be able to access that. And so now he's having to pay out of pocket and can't afford insurance, and is stuck in a predicament where he's paid into the system his whole life and is not in a place to be able to get benefits at the time that he needs those benefits. So cost of living as well is another thing that we need to target. We need to figure out how to incentivize different producers to get food directly to consumer here in the state of Wyoming, try to take care of this food desert that we have here. Right now, it seems like everything is corporatized and commoditized in a way to where we buy our products in from large corporations instead of producing them here and feeding our people from here. So those are kind of the things that I'm seeing and would like to target.
Now, you mentioned spending. I happen to agree with you. We spend a tremendous amount of money, and it's way more than I think is necessary. I mean, the Wyoming's budget has almost doubled in the last few years. Right now, I mean, we're spending $9.5 billion every 2 years. Actually, it's when you add all the other legislation on top of it, I think it's closer to 11. But if you're successful, where would you focus on reducing spending?
Good question. This is difficult for a lot of politicians to answer, because when you start talking about cutting spending, everybody gets scared that they're going to be cut. They talk about schools and other services. And what I see is that's a tactic to hold essential services hostage and not reduce spending. Let me give you an analogy here. That is the analogy of the night watchman. Back in the day, a night watchman was hired to stand guard over an outpost, protecting the local communities, essential work on the ground. And as time went on, people got together and said, we need someone to file paperwork for this guy. We need someone to issue payroll for this guy. You know what? We need somebody to sit the front desk. We need somebody to write regulations and policy for this individual. We need an HR department. Next thing you know,
need the bee watcher.
Yes. And next thing you know, we have 15, 20 people sitting in an air-conditioned room that's being paid for by the government, collecting white-collar salaries, when in reality, there's one man on the ground doing the work. So I think that we're in a unique position today where we can have automated systems issue that payroll in a transparent fashion. We can have automated systems allow the night watchman to enter the data into the filing systems remotely and send that to whatever agencies and other things that needs to be communicated to. We're in a unique situation where we can have systems operate with the people doing the inputs and the people carrying some of the load to save them tax dollars. I think that there's a lot of spending waste occurring in that administrative section of government.
What do you think about the Wyoming? You given any thought to the Wyoming Business Council? What would you do with that?
The Wyoming Business Council, have they succeeded in their goal? Look at our GDP growth. What have we done on GDP growth over the last decade? So if they were successful in what they were supposed to do, then maybe their merits could stand in their defense. But the reality is I don't see success coming from the Wyoming Business Council.
Yeah, I don't either. And your question about the GDP now I don't know about the last couple of years, but in the 27-year history of the Wyoming Business Council, our GDP has actually gone down. That is not a success record, if you ask me. Okay, so one of the things, and you live in Thermop, and so it's
I live in Otto. Yep, Otto. So
even better.
Smaller.
So, Wyoming has a lot of small communities, and in those smaller communities, maybe not as small as Otto, but a majority of people end up working for government in one way, shape, or form. They either work for the county or the city or the state, or they work for the schools. So, question for you specifically, as it's related to schools. I've seen a lot of advertisements that say we're not funding schools adequately. Are we?
My understanding is we're spending approximately $24,000 to $30,000 per student in our district. And my understanding is also that by our own standards, half of the schools in our district either do not meet or only partially meet our standard requirements. So again, you got to look at the outcome of what's going on. The school system was designed, from my understanding, back in the day, the Rockefellers had a heavy hand in that system. Now we have great teachers who've been trained and are trying to do their best to service these children. What I see as the structure in front of us is doing a disservice to our children, is doing a disservice to our teachers. I think it's the way that it's designed and operating is not the most efficient or effective way to teach our children. And I think it's going to take some collaboration between good teachers and school administrators. It's going to take some collaboration to figure out what does that look like, tapping into better efficiency, tapping into better teaching methods. Like, what exactly is that going to look like? As far as, do we fund our schools enough? $24,000 to $30,000 per student is pretty steep.
It's
on
pretty
the funding
expensive.
side of things. Yes. And everybody wants their child to have a good education. My understanding is the Constitution of Wyoming mandates education be made available. The reality I think that we're facing is we've got to look at how do we restructure this to be more efficient and more effective for our children.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we have to look at outcomes. And when you have almost a majority of students that graduate high school in Wyoming that are that don't meet a proficiency level, even in reading. There was Senator Charlie Scott showed me a study. It was last session or the session before, but anyway, that 46% of graduating eighth graders don't read at a proficient level. and yet we're still spending, I think the actual number is like $22,500 or $23,000, and it varies depending on which school district you're in. But if you can't teach a kid to read on 25 grand a year, man, we've got a problem.
I agree. I think that throwing dollars at the board isn't the solution here. I think that it takes a rethink, and it's going to take, like I said, some cooperation and collaboration between smart individuals to get a little creative and figure out how do we make this work.
Well, other states, so South Dakota, I love this statistic. They actually spend about $9,000 a year on each student.
Wow.
And yet their test scores are higher than Wyoming's. Not by a lot, but they're higher. So how is it that they can spend more than half as much as we do, and they have better outcomes? I mean, you're right. I don't think the answer is not money at all.
Yep.
All right, so the big topic. Oh, go ahead, finish.
I was saying that's I come to is I don't have a problem. That's what I see when I cross the board.
Okay, well, you pick up a newspaper or you open up a website, and the big topic right now is data centers. They seem to be popping up everywhere, and if you're around Cheyenne, there's a whole bunch of them. So what's your take on data centers? Does the government have a role in managing them, regulating them? How do you see us handling all of these data centers that are popping up?
Well, I'm pro-business. I'm pro-business, and I think that business, the free market, is what has established this country as what it is. Now, with that said, we need to look at the cost of Wyoming associated with these data centers. Okay, my understanding is these data centers are coming in basically pre-manufactured. They're shipping in their electrical engineers and their workforce, standing these up, putting in electronics, mostly made overseas, and they're going to stand them up, walk away. There's no jobs created. The skeleton crew manages that AI data center after that date. And then they're claiming, we're going to make our own power. We're going to buy your natural gas. We're going to buy your resources and make our own power. Sounds all great in theory. But my understanding is that our capability of manufacturing natural gas turbines is not anywhere near the power demand needed from these AI data centers. You look at coal-fired power plants. My grandfather built these in Utah. It takes decades to get them built, and this was back in the day. In today's political climate, are we getting coal-fired power plants off the ground? I don't think so. Yeah.
One approved,
and
not.
Yes, not built yet. And the water demands associated with that coal-fired power plant, significant as well. The water demands around the chip cooling and the pollution that occurs. Not to mention the land use and the sound pollution, everything else. What I see is there's a reality where these data manufacturers, these AI data centers, are going to move into outer space. I think that they're going to find solar panels are 5 to 10 times more efficient in outer space. You don't have the nighttime cycle. You don't have the filtration of light through the atmosphere. You don't have the cooling of the chips, because outer space is going to cool those chips just by being how cold it is. Elon Musk has been working to have high capacity rockets that can carry high payloads into outer space. I think if we hold out 3 to 5 years and protect our water, protect our land, I think they'll find alternatives to be able to satisfy the needs for AI processing. And I don't think, one other thing I want to discuss is you look at Utah. They're building one there north of Salt Lake that is planning on using 2 times as much power as the entire state of Utah. Can we handle that? And what kind of cost is that going to push off onto our citizens when it comes to their power bill? That's my take on it, is I think that we need to protect our citizens. We need to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of, that their power bill isn't going to go through the roof. Our water is protected. And I think there's better alternatives for these AI data centers than planting right here in Wyoming.
I think that all things being equal, and by the way, you're the second person today to mention Elon Musk to me in exactly the same context, but all things being equal, if a company is jumping through all the regulatory hoops, and which, by the way, I think that we happen to have too many of those. But if they're jumping through all the regulations like every other business, and they're playing by all the rules, and they're not getting subsidized, I see no reason why the government needs to have really any place in it. Now, that's being, what I said was all things being equal. Now, you mentioned the power needs of one of these. Well, just so happens that Wyoming is in the business of selling power. And now I don't know if we can produce enough power necessary for all these. However, I mean, I did have a legislator not that long ago tell me that not all of the generators at Dave Johnston Power Plant are operating right now, that there's only like one or two of them that are going. So really? How much power could we produce if all of them were fired up? I mean, right now, most of the power we generate in the state gets exported out. And so, if we're able to produce enough power, and if said data center is going to buy that power, I really don't have a problem with it. If they're operating on a level playing field with all of these other businesses, because, okay, so maybe there isn't a tremendous amount of jobs that are created, but we're still assessing property taxes. There's still revenue being generated. And so, I'm the pro-business guy, and I think if everybody's playing by the same rules, I'm okay with it. Where we run into problems is things like windmills. Like windmills aren't profitable if they don't have subsidies with them. I mean, that's the wrong idea. Our State Lands and Investment Board, they really need to get a handle on, hey, we shouldn't be approving projects that aren't self-sustaining. If it requires a government subsidy for you to keep your business going, well, then your business probably shouldn't be in operation anyway. And it's really not a business. It's more of a government operation. But I do think that this is a topic that we probably need to have a larger conversation about. It's just that a lot of what I've seen, in the media and just in my conversations with people is that their immediate go-to reaction is always, well, we need to get government involved. No, I think that the job of government is to remain small, and if it's only if it's necessary. But if everybody's playing by the same rules, I say game on.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to argue with your logic there. The thing that concerns me is the constituents and their power bills, but also, I mean, the water rights. Water rights are mainly attached to agricultural land. You can get your industrial water rights and everything like that. Those are hard to come by. And I know that
sure.
the water this year is tight. Being a farmer and rancher here on the Graybull Valley irrigation system, we're all concerned about water, and that goes for the whole state, not just our drainage. So I mean, I can understand what you're saying, on a level playing field, as long as they're not asking for subsidies or tax breaks, which my understanding is a lot of these come in expecting tax breaks. A lot of them,
I'm sure they do.
They come in and they expect, hey, how much are you willing to play ball with us to get us to bring this business to your state? And that is not acceptable in my mind. Like you said, level playing field, let business come and play. But if the people want to stand up and demand that they, essentially put the brakes on it, make sure that the power and everything else that they're going to be using isn't going to be driving their costs through the roof and everything else, then the people should stand up and stand for their rights and should fight their fight.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about another subject. Where are you at on guns? You talk to me about it.
Well, so it's pretty plain and simple here. The Second Amendment says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Cut dry the end. Full stop. There's no questions there. You look at Marbury versus Madison. Any and all laws that are repugnant to the Constitution, null and void. Cut dry the end. Full stop. I believe that guns are there first and foremost to protect the citizens against a tyrannical government. And I believe that they're there to protect their homes, protect their livestock, and protect their property. I believe that is a fundamental right that is God-given and is not granted by government. And that's my stance on the matter.
So if you're elected, do you think that there's more work to be done as it relates to guns, or what would you do when you get to the Wyoming House?
Well, I know that we have, there's a lot of pressure being put on from the federal government, from media, from all these different sources. There's a lot of pressure that's trying to regulate gun sales, trying to regulate who can have them, who can't, make gun-free zones at schools. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, we did away with that one.
And yep. And the thing is, they're going to keep coming back. They're going to come back, and they're going to try to take little bites. They're going to keep trying to take little bites over time. And we need people who are aware of that and watching for that and ready to say no to that. Because with the school shootings that have occurred in this country and the other terrible things that have occurred, they're going to be using those as leverage to try to push that narrative. And we've got to be able to stand our ground and say, while those are atrocities, they cannot infringe on our citizens' Second Amendment right.
So you're a rancher, property owner. What's your take on corner crossing? I mean, we did have a Supreme Court ruling that corner crossing is technically okay. But even after that ruling, I think there was at least one bill this past session that dealt with it. What would your take on that be?
Well, the public lands are there for the people, owned by the people. Now, where a corner crossing comes in, you have the private property and the public property coming on opposing corners. And that's a question of private property rights and public property access. And in that instance, as long as there is not a foot being placed on the private property and there's no harm and damage coming to the private property, I don't believe that impeding public's access to public lands is, I believe the private property rights or the harm caused to the individual from the corner crossing does not impose its will upon the public's access to public land. It seems pretty clear to me, if somebody's driving a vehicle on somebody's private land and they're enforcing their private property rights to stop that, there can be an argument made. But when somebody is walking on foot to a corner and stepping corner crossing, that's pretty hard to argue. And I think that anybody's trying to claim private property rights to impose their will and to stop that, I think there's ulterior motives behind that, not anything to do with their property.
Yeah, for me, it's more of a technical question than anything, and it's only that it is impossible for you to determine with your phone or a handheld GPS, unless you've got a survey grade GPS out there. It's impossible for you to tell exactly where you're at. I mean, you might be 2 meters away from that post, or you might be standing on top of it. You just don't know. And, private property rights are one of those things that if, at least in my mind, that if we give 1 inch, then it ends up being a mile that's taken. Yep. And I don't know if I'm persuaded by, the case that went to the Supreme Court that guy's private property rights were harmed because of the airspace. I don't know how much that I believe. However, I can tell you that, when we start diminishing private property rights, maybe hopping over that fence post turns into a gate, and then it, turns into a road. And so it's one of those, I realize that's a slippery slope argument, but that's one of the things that concerns me. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, Carlin, before I let you go for this afternoon, property taxes, big issue. I'm sure that you've heard about it when you've been talking to constituents. What do you think the best solution for our ever increasing property taxes are?
Well, that's a good question. Let's look at property taxes and private property rights, private property ownership from a principled perspective, just real quick. Private property rights and private property ownership are a fundamental cornerstone of this country and of this state. So the question comes is, if we are forced under threat of removal of life, liberty, and property to pay the government for land that we own, then do we really own the property? And from a principled perspective, my conclusion is we are tenants of the government at that point. I know how much my family has paid in property tax over almost 3/4 of a century. And I know what I'm looking at paying in property taxes over my tenure of this and my stewardship of this land. The reality is from a principled perspective, property taxes, I think, are a violation of our rights. Now, we can't deal with property taxes without dealing with our spending and overspending. In order to be able to respect people's property ownership and property rights, we've got to deal with our overspending issue. We've got to deal with the waste that's occurring in our government. And then that makes the private property taxes a lot easier to respect, to remove that burden from the people. So that's my perspective on property taxes. I know that there's been a something that was passed that allows homeowners 50% relief on their property taxes, and that's I
think you're referring to the ballot initiative that'll be on the ballot in November.
Yes, that's a great step forward. I think it is. It's designed more to appeal to the populace of Wyoming. You know, the urban centers. The agricultural sector still carries a burden on that, and the reality is we may make our living off the land, but after we go through all our expenses and everything associated with that, we're not making any more than somebody that's going into their 9 to 5. But our tax burden is significantly higher. I think that everybody needs relief from the property taxes, and if we can get our spending under control, then I believe that we can actually work towards eliminating property taxes in the entirety.
Okay, I like that. It's a lot of people don't realize the connection between spending and the real resistance of reducing property taxes, but because one always drives the other one. So we're almost out of time, but why don't you take a few minutes and tell me how to get a hold of you if my viewers want to talk to you? How do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a website, cjonesforwyoming.com. You can also get a hold of me via email, cjonesforwyoming@gmail.com. And please feel free to reach out, ask any questions that you have. I'm looking for good principled conservatives to support me here in this fight. I'd like the opportunity to be able to protect my children's rights, future, and freedom from those who would trap them in indentured servitude through taxes and overspending.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to visit with me, Carlin, and keep me posted how your race is going.
Yeah, thank you, David.
All right. Well, that was Carlin Jones in House District 28. And I really liked my discussion with him. I thought he did a pretty good job. And, young guy, seems pretty principled. Now, if you are running for the state legislature, why don't you, and if I haven't reached out to you yet, go ahead and shoot me an email. The address is david@cowboystatepolitics.com. My whole purpose, like the whole thing that I do in elections is I try to interview as many candidates as I possibly can. Just to find out who they are, because you definitely deserve to know. And, if you don't talk to them, then you really can't make an informed decision. And the truth is, if you just let people talk, eventually they will tell you exactly who they are. And so, if you wonder why my interviews are quite a bit different than others, is I just want to hear what people have to say, because I know that the longer they talk, they'll reveal who they actually are. So let's go ahead and take our last break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Eric Barlow's response when he was asked about abortion. Fascinating, man. You should wait until I show you Nathan Winter's face. But I'll tell you about that when we come back. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that the Cow Pie and the Red Star Tribune and the Turkey Vulture, they can't come even close to it. I wish they would try. I might even let them, start over. Start from zero right now and try to get it right. But they don't, because that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to convince you to vote for the people that they want you to vote for. So in my mind, there are very few topics that are as definitive as abortion. Wherever you're at on the life of the unborn, that tells us volumes about who you really are. Let's be honest. If you're going to vote to kill little children, then we probably don't have a heck of a lot else in common. It just speaks directly to your principles. Well, the Wyoming Family Alliance held a forum last Monday, and we had Nathan Winters on the program to talk about it and tell us how he thought things went. And, Nathan is a pretty conservative guy, and he represents a pretty conservative organization. So appreciated his comments, but we didn't get a chance to really delve into some of the things that were said. Well, one of the bigger questions, as you would imagine, was the question of abortion. And Eric Barlow gave, let's just say, a confusing response. Here's what he had to say when asked whether or not he supports the life of the unborn.
Thank you very much. Senator Barlow.
Got to find the question here. Sorry.
Yeah, I forgot what the question
do you agree
was.
with the statement? Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in life, and I voted multiple times for life in the Wyoming legislature. Now, we all know the legal landscape. We can talk about the moral conviction. Absolutely. Unapologetically. The legal landscape changed in 2022. Let's just be clear about that. And so since 2022, the Wyoming legislature has taken up numerous efforts, and I've been a part of those, to advance this absolute viewpoint. Now, in some of those, there were exceptions, because in the legislative process, you actually have to bring people on board. You actually have to advance policy. And so you can look at my record. My record is solid. And folks that have questioned my record, even on the Senate floor, have found themselves having to say, "Oh, not so fast." Eric is unapologetically pro-life, but for exceptions in the legislative process, I don't want any exceptions, but in the legislative process, to advance things, meaningful things, so we don't have additional loss of life, so we don't have hang-ups and hiccups, which as we are dealing with right now, there are times when you have to build consensus around some things. I don't want those, except maybe for me personally, the life of the mother. Other than that, I wouldn't look for anything else. But that's not the way the legislative.
All right. So he starts out his answer saying, well, I'm unapologetically pro-life, which isn't really true. If you look at his voting record. In March, the Open Range Record published a pretty interesting take on Eric Barlow's pro-life record. Go to the Open Range Record. You can find it. The truth is, when his vote is going to be recorded, then he votes pro-life. But if he is the Speaker of the House or the chairman of a committee, typically what happens with pro-life legislation is it goes in his desk drawer. Maybe we ought to call him Desk Drawer Barlow. But when he says, probably the only exception that I might be in favor of is life of the mother. Let me tell you what that actually means. So there's two things to remember when somebody says that. The first is if there is like an emergency in the delivery room. You know, it doesn't happen very often. It's actually pretty rare. Although, you know, I did know a person who died in childbirth. So it does happen. It's just very rare. But if it's an emergency in the delivery room, that's not a question of abortion. That's a question of triage. That's a question of what is, you know, the doctor, which life can the doctor save? He's going to look at it and say, okay, we have our best chance of saving this person. But that's not really what abortion advocates mean when they say life of the mother, because that exception extends to, what do they call it? High risk pregnancies, right? You know, if you happen to be older, maybe you're 40 years old or older, and your doctor might tell you, well, you know, ma'am, this is a high risk pregnancy. You know, it might endanger your life. You know, we might want to consider that. That's where it leads. You see, everybody thinks that it's just a question of what happens in the delivery room. That's not it at all. That exception is, complicated pregnancies, high risk pregnancies. That's where it ends up that, you could face, this could endanger your life. And so, we might just want to, kill the little child. That's where it goes, my friends. So don't let politicians weasel out of that one. Yeah, I mean, you heard Eric Barlow's twisted response. And here's another thing. If he says, I'm unapologetically pro-life, but, in the legislative process, you gotta compromise and work together, and you gotta, I might be in favor of this exception. Anytime, and this is true of a lot of different things. If it is a long, tortured explanation, which is what that was, if it is a long explanation, typically they're trying to get away with it. They're trying to get away from the obvious answer because they don't hold views that most people think. And so the idea is, let me just talk around and around and around this thing and confuse you so much that eventually, hopefully, it'll make sense. It's an attempt to avoid the question. If you believe vehemently in something, it doesn't take you a tortured 5-minute explanation, which that one was only a minute and a half. Okay, so a minute and a half explanation. You're going to answer pretty quick. Somebody asks me what I think about abortion. I'm saying, it's wrong. It's murder. I don't agree with it. You don't have the right to kill another innocent human being. It's not complicated. Guns. The Second Amendment says what it says, and it doesn't say what it doesn't say. It says, shall not be infringed. Pretty easy. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of explanation there. Free speech. Absolute. Yep, you have a right to say things that other people don't like. And in fact, if you don't have that right, you don't have any right to free speech at all. You see what I'm getting at here? If you believe firmly in something, it doesn't take you a long time to explain what the heck you're talking about. The only reason you hear that is when a politician is trying to convince you of something that is not true about them. That's what that is. And so if you're not going to come out of the gate and, say you're for protecting little babies, well, then we got a serious problem. From the cow pie, speaking of little babies, judge strikes down another set of Wyoming's abortion restrictions. And this one is absolutely bizarre, my friends. Listen to the opening paragraph. Quote, and this is the excerpt here, the one at the top. Quote, a retired Wyoming judge. Why do they use retired judges? Because they're not up for retention. That's why. They don't have to face you, the voters. That's why all of these cases go to retired judges. But anyway, a retired Wyoming judge on Friday struck down 3 state-level abortion laws, including one requiring abortion clinics to be licensed as surgical centers. Well, you ever wondered why they don't have to be licensed that way? It's because that would require them to actually follow the law. But anyway, that's my opinion, not theirs, obviously. But here is the really disturbing part. Quote, he said, that is the judge, the pro-choice group challenging the laws provided evidence that, quote, abortion is inherently safe. Inherently safe for whom? That is the one procedure that we have that 100% of the time it results in the death of a human being. How is that inherently safe, and who is it safe for? Because I would argue that abortion is not safe for the mother either. My friends, we are living in upside down world, upside down, backwards, inside out world, where things that were wrong are now right, and things that were incredibly dangerous before are now good and completely safe. It is absolutely bizarre, my friends, how a judge, somebody who ostensibly is able to think through all of these, how could one deduce that abortion, that is, the intentional taking of another innocent human life, how that is inherently safe? Because it's not. It doesn't even meet the definition. I mean, the only way that it meets the definition is if the judge is arguing the case for the plaintiff. That's the only way that this makes sense, and that's exactly what this judge did. All you have to do is read through the piece, and I'm not going to go too far into it because you don't have to. You read the opening paragraph, and if the judge says killing a human being is safe, well, then you already know where it's going. We don't have impartial jurists. We have activists on the bench. Melissa Owens in Jackson, the black-robed activists on the Supreme Court who apparently can ignore parts of a constitutional amendment. That's where we're at, my friends, that the rule of law, common sense, logic, and the black and white words written on the piece of paper don't mean anything. If judges can just make up the law as they go along, then there's no reason to have law in the first place, which, of course, is an absurd argument. But so is this conclusion that abortion is inherently safe. It's just absolutely outrageous, my friends. And, you know, that we could even pick a retired judge is bizarre in and of itself. They're retired, which means they're not doing that anymore. And of course, the argument from the judicial branch is, well, we just don't have enough judges to cover this. You know, we have to pull somebody up from mothballs and get him to rule on this case. It's absurd, my friends. It's not. I mean, I'm sure in some way it's legal, but damned if I know. It's just absolutely wrong. So Major League Baseball is at it again. I know, switching topics really quick, because if I stay on that one for too long, I'm going to end up throwing something through the TV in the studio. But Major League Baseball, as you know, they're big fans of Pride Month. Not all of them. The Texas Rangers is the only Major League Baseball team that is not, I repeat, not, I'll spell it for you, N-O-T, participating in Pride Month. I don't understand why we have to have an entire month to celebrate what somebody does in their bedroom. I mean, it's an abomination is what it is. But there were some pitchers for the San Francisco Giants that decided to write a Bible verse on their hat. You see, in baseball, you are forced to wear uniforms. You know, they have all sorts of different uniforms for different days. And in this one, the San Francisco Giants said, we are wearing the Pride hat today. That is what we're doing. We don't care if it looks good or if it may send us to hell, which it might. Just saying. But you're going to wear it. And so some pitchers from Major League Baseball decided that they were going to write a Bible verse on their hats. And let me just see if I can show this to you real quick. Let's see here, share screen. And they actually got in trouble for it. Let's see here. Where is it? Where is it? Entire. I guess we're going to have to do it this way. Oh, no. Here we go. Right here. So check this out. There it is. You see, he wrote the Bible verse on his hat, and there's their stupid Pride logo. But now Major League Baseball is getting mad at them. From Fox News, Major League Baseball warns San Francisco Giants players for writing Bible verses on Pride Night hats, and I quote. Rachel Campos, let's see here, late last week, sorry, that was just an ad I forgot to delete out of my notes. Late last week, the San Francisco Giants hosted their Pride Night with the team wearing hats with a rainbow-colored Giants logo. Several Giants pitchers, in a statement of their faith, wrote Bible verse designations on their hats. One, starting pitcher Landon Raup, that's who I showed you, addressed his reasoning after the game, saying that the verse is about representing God's covenant. Amen, brother. Amen. It's, quote, it's just about God's covenant and a promise that he makes to us that, his faithfulness and his mercy. It's just kind of something I believe in, and I stand firm in that, and I'm thankful we live in a country where we have the freedom to believe what we want and express what we want. There's no hate at all. It's just what I stand for and what I stand in. I believe in God, he added. Absolutely. I wish more people would just come right out and say it. I'm a Christian, and I believe in Jesus Christ. And I have had to do that myself at my speech in Salt Lake. That's how I started my speech. I said, too often we keep Jesus, in the background. It's fun. Not a church. Sunday mornings we're all about celebrating him. But what about Tuesday mornings on your program? Now you should do that too. Naturally, the public expression of Christian faith did not go over well with the left-wing sports writers who criticized Raup and his teammates. Well, those critics will be overjoyed to hear that Major League Baseball has now officially stepped in. Per The Atlantic, an MLB official has now warned those players against violating the rules and writing on their cap. Quote, the writing on the cap violates our rules and is consistent as is consistent with normal practice. We have warned the players about future violations, said Pat Courtney, MLB's chief communications officer. San Francisco Giants player, let's see, that's, where do I want to go? Yeah. It's interesting that the league chose this issue to issue a warning over, considering writing on caps has long been a part of the sport. Just one example, during the 2025 World Series between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays, players wrote on the sides number 51 on their hats as a gesture of support for Alex Vesia. Vesia and his wife tragically lost their newborn baby daughter as the series started. Did the league warn those players against writing on their caps? No. Another Dodgers reliever, Blake Treinen, drew 2 crosses with Charlie Kirk's name on his hat after Kirk was assassinated in 2025. Clayton Kershaw also wrote a Bible verse on his Pride Night hat. Were both of these players warned against further writing on their caps? No. Adolis Chapman and Adolis Garcia in 2021 wrote SOS Cuba on their hats during the All-Star game that year. Were they warned? No. On the other hand, would MLB have warned a player for writing a message to say support for left-wing politics or for the LGBTQZXPWDS community, for example? That is, after all, the same leadership team that pulled the All-Star game out of Georgia because of misinformation from Joe Biden. Stacey Abrams and left-wing sports writers about the state's new voting rights bill. Would they be issuing this warning if it were not for more criticism from the political left? And the answer to that, my friends, is an unqualified no. Because all of these actions are political. They're pandering to a loud but very, very small segment of our community. Why is it that we have to celebrate an entire month of what deviant behavior somebody does in their bedroom? It's absolutely shocking to me. Now, if we had a straight person's awareness month, what would we all be called? Well, we would be homophobic, of course. The newsreels and the news writers would go apoplectic in writing how absolutely insensitive all of us are. The truth is, my friends, in this world, in this country, you have, not in this world, but in this country, you have the freedom of speech, the First Amendment. And companies that say, no, we are going to force you to participate in something that you disagree with, well, really, they should read the First Amendment. And maybe they shouldn't be supporting deviant sexual behavior in somebody's bedroom and then forcing all of us to know about it. The truth is, my friends, that all of these organizations, MLB, I love Major League Baseball. I love the Texas Rangers, and thank God they're the one team that is standing for what they believe in. I wish other teams would do that. Obviously, there's players that don't agree with this whole Pride Night stupidity. But anyway, my friends, that'll pretty much do it for today's installment of the broadcast. Couple of notices before I let you go. If you have not yet voted in the Open Range Record poll to determine who is going to be on the debate stage on July 16th, go to openrangerecord.com. The story's pinned to the top. You'll see it. It's right underneath the main story. You can vote for the 5 people you want to see on our debate stage. And come June 30th, whomever the top 5 are, that's who we're inviting to the debate. Of course, we're going to invite them all. We want everybody to attend. But the 5 that are going to be on the debate stage, that's up to you. So if you haven't voted yet, go vote. Also, make sure that you subscribe, follow, like the program, share it with all your friends. And I know everybody tells you to do that, but it really does help. We want Cowboy State Politics to become it already is, the biggest conservative podcast in the state. Definitely the biggest political podcast, without a doubt. So anyway, just make sure that you like and follow and share it with all your friends. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson. This is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.